My beloved friends, let us come together in this moment, not as seekers attempting to gain something, not as minds reaching outward for new ideas, but as silent witnesses to a truth that has existed from all eternity. We are not here to learn anything in the ordinary sense of learning. We are here to remember. We are here to awaken to that which has always been present within us, waiting to be recognized. And so before we take even a single step into our subject, let us pause, let us rest. Not thinking, not striving, not reaching for meaning, just resting in the gentle awareness that we are here and that the presence which has gathered us together is already at work. Today we turn our attention to a statement spoken 2,000 years ago, yet as alive now as the moment it was first uttered. I and the Father are one. These are not words to be admired or repeated for their poetry. They are not a doctrine nor a creed. They are not a declaration belonging to one man or one age. They are a revelation of truth, a truth about God, yes, but also a truth about you. For whatever is true of God must be true of his offspring. And whatever was revealed in the consciousness of the Master, Jesus, must, in its fullness, be the truth of our own being. When Jesus declared, I and the Father are one, he was not elevating himself above others. He was not distinguishing himself from mankind. He was unveiling the nature of spiritual identity. He was revealing what stands behind every appearance of personhood, every individual form, every spark of consciousness that breathes and moves and lives. He was pointing to the secret that lies at the core of all mystical awakening. There is not God and man. There is God as man. There is not a creator distant from creation. There is the one life, expressing itself in infinite forms. So today, as we begin our contemplation, I invite you to set aside every preconceived notion of who you believe yourself to be. Lay aside, for this hour, the burdens of human identity, your successes, your failures, your hopes, your fears, all the labels and conditions that have seemed to define you. They have their place in human experience, but they have no place in spiritual truth. For the truth of your being cannot be confined within the boundaries of a personal self. The I that Jesus spoke of is the same I that animates your life. It is not the personal ego. It is not the mind with its changing beliefs. It is not the body with its limitations. It is the Christ, the divine selfhood, the presence of God individualized as you. Let us understand something from the very beginning. We are not here to try to become one with God. We are not here to search for union. Union already is. We are here to recognize it. The statement, I and the Father are one, is not an achievement to be earned. It is not a spiritual attainment for the advanced. It is the truth of being, awaiting realization. As sunlight is ever shining, even when hidden by clouds, so the truth of oneness shines eternally behind every belief in separation, waiting only for the clouds to part, for the false sense of self to yield to the real. And so our purpose today is very simple. It is to enter into a deeper awareness of what these words reveal, and to observe, not through intellect, but through inner discernment, the changes that begin to occur when this truth is allowed to live in us, to breathe through us, to become the center from which our entire life flows. But before we go further, we must do something essential. We must pause. We must become still. For truth is not heard in the noise of the mind. Truth is not recognized by effort. Truth is not reached through study alone. Truth is revealed in silence, in receptivity, in that openness of soul which asks for nothing, expects nothing, and simply abides in the presence. Let us, therefore, in this sacred moment, release every attempt to understand with the mind. Let us relax our grasp on explanation and rest in the quiet assurance that the truth knows how to reveal itself. We need not force it. We need only yield. As we begin this journey into the meaning and lived experience of oneness, remember, we are not striving to become something greater. We are awakening to what already is. The Father and I are not two. The Father and I are one. And the recognition of this truth is the beginning of spiritual freedom. Let us move forward now, gently, quietly, into the deeper contemplations of this principle. My friends, as we turn more deeply into this teaching, let us again remember that spiritual truth is not discovered through the intellect. The intellect can repeat words, but it cannot taste the reality behind them. The intellect can analyze concepts, but it cannot receive the grace that transforms one's life. The truth we seek is not external. It is experienced in the silence of our own being. And so, let us enter gently. When Jesus used the word I, he was not referring to the personality called Jesus of Nazareth. He was speaking from the standpoint of the Christ, the divine presence, manifesting itself as individual consciousness. This distinction is vital. For as long as we read Scripture as though it describes a man speaking about himself alone, we miss the living revelation that the Master intended. The I of Scripture is not personal. It is not local. It is not confined to one body, one mind, or one lifetime. The I is the one self, expressing in infinite individuality, yet never divided, never separated, never fragmented. It is the life of God unfolding as the life of you, the life of me, the life of every living being. We may say, my life, but life itself is one. We may say, my mind, but mind itself is one. We may say, my spirit, but spirit itself is one. What we individually express is not a separate source of being, but an individualization of the one infinite source. This is why, throughout the infinite way, I have reminded students again and again, you are not a person with a spiritual capacity. You are the infinite spirit expressing through a form called person. This shift is profound. It is the beginning of liberation from fear, for fear can exist only when we imagine ourselves as separate individuals, vulnerable to external powers. But when we perceive that the very I that looks out through our eyes is the same I that Jesus recognized as the Father within, then fear loses its foundation. For how can the infinite fear the finite? How can the eternal fear the temporal? How can the omnipresent be threatened by a circumstance in time or space? The human I, the ego, the personal sense of self is always insecure. It clings, it strives, it defends, it judges, it seeks approval, fears rejection, longs for safety. But this I is not the true identity. It is a passing shadow, a mental construct without divine substance. It is born of conditioning, memory, and imagination. It has no life of its own. The true I is the Christ, and the Christ knows no fear, no lack, no separation. The Christ is the quiet assurance within you that whispers, I am here. I am ever present. I am the bread, the light, the way. It is the one universal identity, appearing as individual you. Let us pause again, not to think, but to sense, merely to sense. The I that is aware right now, this awareness itself, is not personal. It has no age. no boundary, no weight, no location. Awareness simply is. You have never experienced awareness as pleasant or unpleasant. Awareness is neutral, still, infinite. It cannot be harmed. It cannot be improved. It cannot be diminished. That awareness is the I that Jesus spoke of. This awareness is the Father's presence, the life of God, appearing as the life of man. And so, when we speak of I and the Father are one, we are not speaking of two things joined. We are speaking of a single reality, appearing in two words. The Father is the infinite source. The I is that same infinite source individualized as conscious being. In this awareness, there is no personal achievement. There is no pride. There is no elevation of the individual. There is only humility, a quiet and natural humility, because one sees that there is no separate life to boast of and no separate burden to carry. The human mind may resist this truth because it cannot grasp a self that is not personal. It cannot imagine identity without boundaries. But you, your true you, does not need the human mind to validate reality. Reality exists before thought, beneath thought, beyond thought. Now, let us look at the implications of this principle. If the I in you is the same infinite presence that animated the Master, then you lack nothing essential to the spiritual life. You do not need to struggle to become spiritual. You do not need to labor to become worthy. You do not need to improve yourself in order to approach God. You are already the expression of the divine. The work is simply to remove the masks, the layers of belief, the old conditioning that has convinced you that you are a mortal attempting to reach the immortal. You are not mortals reaching for God. You are infinite life revealing itself in mortal appearance. The recognition of this truth does not inflate the ego. It dissolves it. It removes the burden of living as though everything depends upon personal effort, personal wisdom, personal strength. It releases you from the exhausting task of trying to be good enough for God. For God is already living its own life as you. Rest in that for a moment. Behind your thoughts, behind your feelings, behind the body and its sensations, behind the personality with its history and desires, there is an I, a pure, silent, eternal I that never began and will never end. That I is the Christ of you. This is the nature of the I. This is the self that lives you. And as we continue, we will see how the belief in a separate I, the false sense of self, creates the only barrier to spiritual realization, and how the recognition of the true I dissolves separation as naturally as the sun dissolves mist. My friends, let us continue gently in the same spirit of inner stillness that has carried us thus far, for all spiritual revelation unfolds in quietness. The noise of the world cannot reveal truth, nor can the noise of the mind. Let us rest deeply as we enter this next contemplation. We have spoken of the true I, the divine identity within every individual. But if this I is already whole, already perfect, already one with God, then we must ask, what obscures the experience of this truth? What stands between us and the awareness of our divine nature? The infinite way teaches that there is only one error, and that error is the belief in separation. Every form of discord, every form of disease, every form of fear can be traced to this single false assumption. The assumption that we exist as beings apart from our source. This belief in separation is the root of all spiritual ignorance. It is the foundation upon which the entire structure of human suffering is built. For once we accept the idea that we are separate from the infinite, we must then inevitably live as though we are dependent upon something outside ourselves, dependent on people for love, on conditions for safety, on money for supply, on external agencies for healing. But all such dependence arises only because we have lost sight of the simple truth. The Father and I are one. The moment we imagine ourselves to be something other than that, one, a sense of lack is born, and out of that sense of lack comes striving, worrying, fearing, competing, judging, defending, desiring, grasping. The entire machinery of human effort springs from the single illusion that we are something less than the infinite expressing itself. And so the great question becomes, how did this sense of separation arise? It did not arise in reality. It arose only in belief. A shadow on the wall has no substance of its own. It is not a thing. It is not an entity. It is merely the appearance created when something blocks the light. In the same way, the belief in separation is not a real condition. It is only a shadow cast upon consciousness when the light of truth is obscured by the false sense of self. Separation is not a condition in God. It is not a condition within you. It is not a condition within anyone. It is a misperception, a dreamlike state in which we imagine ourselves to be what we are not. Let us pause again, not to think, but to rest in the awareness that separation has never existed. It has existed only as a belief, never as truth. Once we see this, once we glimpse, even faintly, that separation is unreal, something begins to shift within us. We find that many of the fears that governed us begin to lose their authority. We see that we are not separate lives, struggling to connect with God. We are God's own life, expressing as individual being. We see that we are not isolated minds seeking truth. We are truth itself coming into awareness. We see that we are not disconnected branches straining to reach the vine. We are the very vine life appearing as branches. This realization does not come all at once. It unfolds gradually through moments of illumination, moments of silence, moments of surrender. But as it unfolds, the sense of separation dissolves. When separation dissolves, fear dissolves. For what is there to fear if the presence that formed the universe is the same presence that lives as your very consciousness? What is there to fear if the intelligence that governs galaxies is the intelligence that governs your unfolding? What is there to fear if the love that sustains all creation is the love that breathes you every moment? When separation dissolves, lack dissolves. For how can there be lack in the presence of the infinite source? How can there be emptiness where the fullness of God stands revealed as your identity? When separation dissolves, conflict dissolves. For conflict exists only between two imagined selves, yours and another's. But when the veil lifts, and we perceive that the same Christ, the same divine consciousness, stands behind every individual expression, the need to judge, to defend, to accuse, to protect the personal self begins to fade. We no longer look at appearances and call them reality. We see God where the human sees man. We see harmony where the human sees discord. We see the one where the human sees many. This does not mean ignoring the outer world. It means seeing through it. It means recognizing that appearances arise from consciousness, and therefore the only place of correction is within. We cease attempting to fix shadows on the wall. We turn to the light that casts them. The belief in separation is the only falsehood. The recognition of oneness is the only truth. And the moment that recognition dawns, even if only for a breath, the soul finds rest. Let us pause again, and in this pause, let us let the truth permeate our being. There is no separation, none. I am not separate from God. I am not separate from divine supply. I am not separate from love. I am not separate from peace. I am not separate from life. I am not separate from the infinite. Whatever separation I believed in existed only as a dream, dissolving now in the light of awareness. As we move forward, we will discover how this dissolution of separation marks the beginning of a profound shift from living as a human, trying to be spiritual, to living as the spiritual identity that has always been the truth of our being. And now, my friends, let us move gently into the heart of the spiritual journey, that sacred transition in which the sense of humanhood begins to yield to the awareness of Christ's identity. Remember, we are not creating a new self. We are not attempting to improve the human. We are awakening to the self that has been present from the beginning. In spiritual life, nothing is added and nothing is taken away. There is only revelation. The layers that hid the truth begin to fall away, and what is revealed is not a better human being, but the divine nature that always stood behind the human appearance. This shift is subtle. It is not accompanied by noise or display. It does not announce itself with fireworks or visions. It comes quietly, the way dawn comes to the earth. One moment, everything appears the same, and yet something has changed. A light has touched the horizon of consciousness. A stillness has entered the heart. A certainty begins to arise, not a certainty based on thought, but a certainty that comes from a place deeper than thought. In this stage, you may find that fear begins to lose its grip, even before outer conditions improve. You may discover that you no longer feel the old compulsion to manage life, to control outcomes, to direct every detail according to the mind's desire. Something within you begins to trust, without knowing why. Something within you begins to relax, even while circumstances remain the same. This is the first sign that the sense of humanhood is loosening. Humanhood lives by effort. Christ's identity lives by grace. Humanhood depends on personal strength. Christ's identity depends on the Father within. Humanhood fears the unknown. Christ's identity rests in the assurance of ever-present intelligence. Humanhood seeks God. Christ's identity recognizes, I already and eternally am one with God. This shift is not a change in the outer way of living, but a change in the inner state of seeing. We begin to behold the world not through the lens of fear, but through the lens of truth. We notice that the world appears the same, yet something in us is different. The same day unfolds, but we are not the same person meeting the day. You will notice that you become less reactive. A circumstance that once aroused fear or anger now elicits a quiet awareness. This is not power. This is not cause. This is appearance. And with that recognition, the appearance begins to lose its authority. The shift has begun. There is also a new capacity to observe the personal self without identifying with it. You may see irritation arise, or sadness, or worry, and yet you know deep within that these emotions do not belong to the eye of your being. They appear, they move, they pass, but they do not define you. They are ripples on the surface of a great ocean. They are not the ocean itself. The human sense of me, with all its conditions, its memories, its insecurities, no longer stands at the center of awareness. Something else now stands there. A presence, a life, a quiet depth that does not change with circumstances. This presence is not something you possess, it is something you are. It was always there, but it was obscured by the conviction that you were separate, limited, personal. In this shift, you begin to say less I think and more I observe, less I want and more I allow, less I need and more I rest, less I must fix this and more let me return to center and let the Father reveal the way. The moment you touch this Christ awareness, even briefly, you begin to understand what Jesus meant when he said, I can of mine own self do nothing. And also, it is the Father within me that doeth the works. He was not expressing inadequacy. He was expressing truth. The human self is not the actor. The divine presence is the activity. As this realization deepens, a remarkable transformation occurs. You find yourself doing what needs to be done, caring for your home, performing your work, tending to daily responsibilities, but with an inner lightness. The sense of burden lifts because you no longer feel that your personal effort is the source of your good. You are not the provider. You are not the healer. You are not the protector. The Father, operating as your consciousness, is all that is needed. You become, in Goldsmith's words, a transparency through which God lives. This shift is not a dramatic break from human life. It is a soft dawning of real life in the midst of human appearance. You still appear as a person among persons, yet inwardly you know you are not that person. You are the Christ, bearing witness to God's activity in a form called you. In this awareness, an inner harmony begins to infuse your days. Peace arises where there was once tension. Assurance arises where there was once doubt. A gentle joy arises, not the joy of excitement, but the joy of being aligned with truth, the joy of resting in the One. This is the movement from humanhood to Christ identity. Not a leap, not a sudden transformation, but an unfolding, a yielding, a softening, a remembering. And once the shift begins, it continues, sometimes imperceptibly, sometimes with clear moments of illumination, sometimes with growing pains, but it continues, because truth, once glimpsed, cannot unreveal itself. It draws us forward, gently, inevitably, toward full realization. As we go on, we will see how this inner shift begins to express outwardly, not through effort, but through natural consequence. For when consciousness changes, experience must follow. And when the identity shifts from the human sense of self to the Christ within, life begins to reorganize itself around the harmony of the divine. And now, my beloved friends, let us look more deeply at what happens when the inner recognition of oneness becomes the foundation of our daily living. For spiritual realization is not a refuge from the world, it is the light through which we behold the world rightly. When we begin to know, even dimly, that the Father and I are one, a new rhythm enters life. The old patterns of striving and resisting begin to dissolve. The frantic need to control outcomes loosens its hold. We cease living as though the world outside determines our peace, our supply, our safety, our success. Instead, we sense that everything unfolds from the inner state of consciousness, and therefore the true work is always within. Living from oneness does not mean withdrawing from the responsibilities of daily life. It does not mean ignoring the appearances that arise on the horizon of experience. Rather, it means meeting those appearances with a different consciousness, with a consciousness that knows no external power, no external cause, no external authority. When a problem arises, the human mind instinctively moves outward. It looks for solutions, for remedies, for ways to fix what seems wrong. But when we live from the awareness of oneness, the first impulse is different. The outer appearance no longer commands our full attention. We turn inward. We become still. We recognize that the appearance has no power of its own, no substance except the meaning we give it. In that inward stillness, we remember there is only one presence, one power, one activity, and that one is the source and substance of all that appears as my life. From this recognition, harmony begins to assert itself without our struggling to impose it. Where there is financial pressure, we no longer say, "How shall I get more supply?" Instead, we turn inward and rest in the truth that supply is not external. Supply is the flow of divine grace through consciousness. It is the activity of God as individual being. It is not stored in a bank account. It is stored in the infinite. And when consciousness recognizes its oneness with that infinite source, the outer form of supply arranges itself according to the inner realization. Where there is discord in relationships, we no longer attempt to reshape people or persuade them to behave differently. We do not seek to change the outer. We turn inward and behold the Christ of them, the same Christ that lives as our own identity. In that vision, something softens. We see not two separate selves, but one divine life appearing in two forms. And because our consciousness has changed, the relationship begins to reflect that change, often without words, without explanations, without effort. Where there is illness, we no longer fight the condition as though it had power of its own. Instead, we recognize that the body is an instrument for the expression of consciousness. Its appearance is but the outer picture of the inner state. And so we release the belief in disease as a reality. We do not deny the appearance. We deny its authority. We deny its supposed power to govern our life. We rest in the truth that the reality of our being is spiritual, indestructible, eternal. In that recognition, healing becomes either the restoration of physical harmony or the emergence of a peace deeper than physical outcome. In either case, the Christ governs. As we continue living in this awareness, something remarkable happens. We begin to witness a world that responds to consciousness, not because we manipulate it, but because consciousness naturally expresses its own nature. When consciousness is filled with fear and separation, life appears chaotic, unstable, lacking. When consciousness recognizes its unity with God, life appears harmonious, supported, beautiful. Therefore, living from oneness means allowing the inner truth to shape the outer experience, not by deliberate effort, but by the nature of consciousness itself. A tree does not strain to bring forth fruit. It simply abides in its nature, and fruit appears. In the same way, when we abide in the consciousness of oneness, the fruit of harmony appears in our daily life. We find ourselves guided without thinking, inspired without planning, supplied without scheming. The right people appear. The right opportunities unfold. The right actions become clear. Not through human reasoning, but through the quiet, steady activity of the inner presence that knows what we need before we ask. Living from oneness also means that we cease trying to make life conform to our personal desires. We no longer live from the standpoint of "I want this" or "I must avoid that." The personal will begins to dissolve, and in its place arises the willingness to let the divine rhythm govern our days. We trust that life knows how to express itself without our constant interference. In this way, oneness becomes not a principle we affirm intellectually, but a living reality. It becomes the way we walk through the world, the way we meet each moment. We respond not from habit, not from fear, not from the memory of past wounds, but from the quiet certainty that the presence within us is the same presence guiding all creation. And as we deepen in this awareness, we discover something even more profound. We are no longer living life. Life is living us. We become instruments through which the infinite expresses its harmony. We become clear windows through which the light of God shines. We become, as Scripture says, living branches of the vine, bearing fruit not through effort but through presence. This is the meaning of living from oneness. This is the first taste of freedom. This is the beginning of the life that Jesus described when he said, "My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth." My friends, let us hold this awareness gently as we move toward the next stage of our contemplation. My friends, having contemplated the truth of our oneness with God, and having seen how this inner realization begins to govern the outer life, we now come to a most important part of spiritual practice, the maintenance of awareness. Spiritual truth, once glimpsed, must be tended like a flame, not by effort, but by remembrance, not by strain, but by inner turning, not by willpower, but by surrender. No one on this path is asked to maintain a perfect consciousness. We are asked only to return again and again to the inner center where God is recognized as the One. This is what Goldsmith called the practice of knowing. Knowing is not thinking. Knowing is not reciting affirmations. Knowing is not repeating phrases in the hope they will become real. Knowing is a quiet, inward awareness that the truth is already established in consciousness, and our task is simply to remain receptive to it. Throughout the day, many impressions come to us: news, conversation, responsibilities, demands, appearances that seem to contradict truth. These impressions are not problems. They are invitations. Each moment that presents an appearance of separation becomes a doorway through which we can return to the truth of oneness. You may be at work, facing a difficult person or a stressful situation. In that moment, you pause inwardly sometimes for only a breath, and you remember there is only one presence here. There is only one mind functioning. There is only one life expressing itself. This remembrance is not said to change the outer situation. It is said to restore your consciousness to alignment. And when consciousness is aligned, the situation changes of its own accord, sometimes visibly, sometimes invisibly, sometimes in ways the mind cannot predict. The practice of knowing is simply this: whenever the appearance distracts you, return to the truth. If fear arises, return. If irritation arises, return. If confusion arises, return. If a sense of hurry or pressure arises, return. Return, not to a thought, but to the silent awareness of the divine presence. It is not necessary to spend long periods of meditation in order to live from this awareness. Long meditations are helpful, but the spiritual life unfolds in the small pauses, the brief moments of recognition woven throughout the day. A minute of stillness before beginning your work, a pause in the middle of a conversation, a quiet breath before answering a difficult message, a moment of turning inward as you walk, or rest, or wait. These brief pauses are like the continual clearing of dust from a mirror. Without them, the mirror becomes obscured. With them, the light shines unobstructed. In these moments, you need not use many words. Often, it is best to use none. The silence itself is the teacher. Yet sometimes a simple inner reminder helps steady the mind. A phrase such as, God is I am, and the two are one, or only the presence is power, or the Father within me doeth the works. But remember, these words are not magic formulas. They are not affirmations designed to force truth upon the mind. They are gentle signals to consciousness, turning attention away from the world of appearances and toward the reality of spirit. As you continue this practice, you will notice something. Your need to fix life diminishes. Your need to understand every situation diminishes. Your need to defend yourself diminishes. Your need to get something from the world diminishes. Why? Because you begin to see that the world is not the source of your peace, nor the cause of your discord. All experience flows from consciousness. And therefore, your work is never in the outer realm, it is always within. This practice of turning inward, of remembering truth, begins to create a state of inner stability. You may still encounter challenges, but you no longer feel tossed by them. You no longer feel controlled by external change. A deeper anchor has been planted within your being. Gradually, you discover that this inner recognition begins to flow without your conscious effort. You find yourself pausing naturally. You find yourself remembering without trying. You find yourself resting in truth even before the mind has a chance to react. At first, the practice feels deliberate. Later, it becomes spontaneous. Eventually, it becomes the natural state of consciousness. This is the fruit of grace unfolding through you. There may be days when you forget. There may be moments when appearances seem overwhelming. This does not mean you have failed. It means only that another opportunity has appeared to turn inward again. Spiritual realization does not unfold because we are perfect. It unfolds because truth is perfect. And truth calls us back to itself again and again, gently, lovingly, with infinite patience. Therefore, let your practice be light. Let it be gentle. Let it be natural. Let it be a quiet returning, not a forced discipline. Let it rise from the heart's desire to rest in what is real. And as you practice in this way, you will begin to see how the divine presence, once recognized inwardly, flows into every corner of daily life, governing, guiding, harmonizing, revealing the peace that passes understanding. This is the practice of knowing, a continual returning to the inner truth that God is the very life of your being. It is the silent acknowledgement that wherever you go, whatever arises, the presence within you is your sufficiency in all things. And now, my friends, having practiced the gentle art of inward remembrance, let us turn our attention to the fruits that naturally arise from living in the consciousness of oneness. We do not cultivate these fruits through effort, nor do we strive to achieve them. They come of their own accord, the way blossoms appear on the branch when the tree abides in its rootedness. The branch does nothing. The blossom comes because the life of the tree is flowing freely. In the same way, as the life of the Christ begins to flow unobstructed through your consciousness, certain qualities begin to appear not as goals to be reached, but as the natural consequence of God recognized as the essence of your being. The first fruit is peace, not the peace that comes from favorable circumstances, nor the peace that disappears when life becomes uncertain, but a peace that has no opposite, because it does not originate from the world. It arises from the quiet knowing that all power is in God, and that God is the very life expressing as your individual being. This peace is not passive. It is not numbness. It is not withdrawal from life. It is a peace that stands firm in the midst of all appearances. A peace that says, nothing external has power over the reality of my being. A peace that allows you to move through the world with steadiness, compassion, and clarity. Where the human sense of self once lived in constant anxiety, always worrying about the next event, the next need, the next outcome. This deeper peace frees you from the tyranny of anticipation. You learn to dwell in the present moment, not because you practice mindfulness as a technique, but because the truth of oneness anchors you in the eternal. Now, the second fruit is grace. Grace is the activity of God pouring through your consciousness without your effort, without your planning, without your will. Grace arranges your life in ways the human mind could never orchestrate. It brings the right opportunities at the right time. It dissolves obstacles without struggle. It provides solutions before the mind even identifies the problem. It carries you forward, quietly, gently, irresistibly. Grace is not something you attract. Grace is something you stop obstructing. When the belief in separation dissolves, the flow of grace becomes natural and continuous. You begin to live in a state where the burdens you once carried, financial worry, relational tension, fear of the future, are lifted. Not because the outer world has suddenly become perfect, but because you are no longer drawing your life from the world. You are drawing it from the infinite. The third fruit is the dissolution of fear. Fear cannot survive in the consciousness of oneness, because fear depends entirely on the belief that something exists outside of God. And once you see clearly that nothing exists outside of God, that all life is the unfoldment of the one, fear loses its foundation. This does not mean you will never again feel the sensation of fear, but it does mean that fear will no longer dominate you. It will no longer define your decisions. It will no longer shape your perception. You will feel it arise, perhaps as a ripple in the human sense, and you will watch it pass through without attaching to it, because you will know this fear has no truth in it. It is not a message. It is not a prophecy. It is a shadow cast by old beliefs that no longer govern my life. The dissolution of fear is not a sudden event. It unfolds gradually as trust deepens. But each time you witness fear arise and then dissolve in the presence of truth, you are strengthened. You become more anchored, more confident, not in the personal self, but in the divine presence that lives as your being. A fourth fruit reveals itself as inner guidance, not the guidance of the intellect, nor the guidance of seeking signs or omens, but the quiet knowing that arises from within when you are aligned with the presence. It is a still, calm direction, not a voice, not a command, but a clarity. You simply know. You know when to act and when to wait. You know when to speak and when to remain silent. You know when to step forward and when to step back. This inner guidance becomes the new rhythm of life, replacing the old habit of overthinking, analyzing, and worrying about the future. You discover that inspiration comes in perfect timing, without strain, without planning. Another fruit is compassion, not emotional sympathy, but the compassion that arises when you see the Christ in every individual. You see that their errors are not their true identity. You recognize that every person you meet is an expression of the same divine life that breathes you. This recognition births a new gentleness in you, a gentleness in your speech, in your reactions, in your judgments. The instinct to criticize begins to fade. The desire to be right begins to soften. The craving for personal recognition begins to dissolve. You move through the world not as a human reacting to other humans, but as a witness to God expressing in countless forms. And finally, a profound fruit emerges. Joy. Not excitement, not temporary happiness, but a joy that has no reason because it does not depend on external conditions. It is the joy of simply being, the joy of resting in truth, the joy of knowing you are lived by the infinite, the joy of recognizing the presence as your very existence. This joy shines quietly from within, and others feel it even when you say nothing. It is the fragrance of spirit, the natural radiance of a consciousness no longer weighed down by the illusions of separation. These, my friends, are the fruits of oneness, peace, grace, fearlessness, guidance, compassion, and joy. Not goals, not achievements, but the effortless outflow of a consciousness aligned with the truth of its identity. In our next contemplation, we will explore how this realization expands outward, how the recognition of the divine I within ourselves naturally leads to the recognition of the same I in every individual we encounter. My friends, as we come deeper into this sacred journey, something beautiful begins to unfold. The recognition of our own divine identity, the I that is one with God, naturally expands outward, radiating into our vision of others. The inner realization cannot remain contained. It moves silently, invisibly, into the way we perceive every individual we encounter. For the truth is this: there are not many I's, there is only one. There is only one life living itself through infinite forms, only one consciousness appearing as this person, that person, and the one you call yourself. Only one I wearing countless masks of human personality. Once this dawns in consciousness, something profound happens. The old sense of me and them dissolves. The instinct to judge fades. The impulse to condemn evaporates. A new tenderness arises, a tenderness born from seeing the one Christ shining behind every face. At first, you may experience this recognition only in moments. Moments when you look at another and suddenly see, if only for a breath, that the same divine presence living in you is the same presence living as them. This recognition may come unexpectedly, perhaps as someone speaks, or as you observe them working, or even in silence as you simply behold them. In that instant, the veil parts. You no longer see a personality. You no longer see a history. You no longer see their flaws, nor their opinions, nor their behavior. You see only the light. You see only the Christ of them. And in that seeing, love flows effortlessly, not emotional love, but divine love, impersonal, unconditional, eternal. This seeing does not require you to approve of everything a person does. It does not turn wrong behavior into right behavior, but it reveals something deeper, that behind the behavior, behind the mask, behind the story, there lives an identity untouched by time, unscarred by experience, forever whole. And when you see that identity, even for a moment, something inside you softens. The conflict you once held dissolves. The hurt loosens its grip. The sense of separation fades like a dream upon waking. This recognition is the foundation of spiritual healing. For you cannot heal another by attempting to change their outer condition. You heal only by seeing the truth of them, the self that never needed healing, the self that is eternally perfect. Goldsmith taught that spiritual healing is not the correction of a human problem. It is the unveiling of reality. And that reality is always the Christ identity in every individual. As this awareness deepens, you may find that your reactions to people begin to change. Those who once irritated you no longer hold the same charge. Those who once threatened you no longer seem dangerous. Those who once seemed distant now feel intimately connected, though no words are exchanged. Why? Because you are no longer relating from personality to personality. You are relating from spirit to spirit. The universal I is meeting itself through the form of another. You begin to see that every person who crosses your path is an opportunity not to judge, not to compare, not to defend, but to behold the Christ where the world sees only man. And so, when someone behaves harshly, you may pause inwardly and say, Father, forgive them not because they are guilty, but because they know not the self that lives as them. Let me see the Christ where the world sees a person. When someone is suffering, you may turn inward and behold the truth. That which God is, they are. Their true identity is untouched by this appearance. When someone is lost or confused, you may rest in the knowing. The same light that guides me guides them. There is only one mind, and it is their mind as well. This recognition does not require words. It requires only sight, spiritual sight. And when this sight becomes clear, harmony begins to appear in your relationships, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically, because you are no longer meeting others on the battlefield of personalities. You are meeting them in the sanctuary of oneness. As the universal I becomes your reference point, compassion becomes natural, patience becomes effortless, understanding becomes spontaneous. You realize that people behave from their level of awareness. And when their awareness is clouded, they suffer, and that suffering expresses itself outwardly. When their awareness is clear, their lives reflect that clarity. Therefore, you no longer take their actions personally. You no longer interpret their behavior as an attack against your human self. You see through the appearance and rest in the truth. And something beautiful happens. You begin to see your own past enemies differently. Their image softens, their story changes. You no longer hold them in the prison of memory. You release them not by effort, but because you have awakened from the very illusion that formed the conflict in the first place, separation. This recognition expands outward to include not only individuals, but the world. You begin to feel a sense of unity with all life, animals, nature, humanity, creation. You see that the same life living itself animates the birds of the air, the trees of the forest, the ocean's rhythm, the stars in their silent courses. You realize that the universal I is the pulse of the cosmos itself. And in that realization, your heart opens in a way that cannot be explained, only felt. This is the fruit of seeing the one in all. A life lived in harmony, a heart freed from judgment, a mind released from fear, a soul awakened to the truth that there is only God, and God is expressing as all that is. In our final section, we will gather everything we have contemplated and return once more to the inner center, the fountain from which all truth flows. And now, my beloved friends, we come to the close of this journey, not an ending, but a gentle return, a return to the inner fountain from which all truth, all peace, all revelation flows. For what we have contemplated together is not a system, not a doctrine, not a philosophy to be memorized. It is the movement of spirit within your own being. It is the recognition of what has always been true, but perhaps forgotten, obscured, or overlooked in the noise of the world. Let us rest for a moment. Let us allow the breath to settle, the mind to soften, the heart to open. We are not reaching for something. We are allowing something, allowing truth to rise from within. Everything we have spoken, oneness, the true I, the dissolution of separation, the flow of grace, the universal Christ. In all these are not ideas to be held in the intellect. They are living realities, waiting to be felt in the quiet chambers of consciousness. And so, as we conclude this teaching, I invite you to turn inward again to that sacred center where God is living its own life as you feel for that presence, not as a sensation, not as an emotion, but as a quiet certainty, a gentle knowing, a subtle awareness that you are not separate from the infinite. If you listen now, you may notice that the presence has been here all along, waiting patiently behind your thoughts, behind your concerns, behind the movement of daily life. It waits for no achievement, no worthiness, no attainment. It simply waits for recognition. This presence is your true home. It is the source of your peace. It is the wellspring of your supply. It is the healer of your wounds. It is the light of your path. It is your identity. The world may offer storms, but the presence offers calm. The world may offer uncertainty, but the presence offers assurance. The world may show you division, but the presence reveals oneness. And so the spiritual journey is not an ascent to some far-off realm. It is a continual returning to the inner fountain, returning to the truth of being, returning to the silence from which all revelation flows. Each day you will forget. Each day you will remember again. This is natural. This is the rhythm of awakening. Do not judge yourself when you forget. Do not congratulate yourself when you remember. Allow the process to unfold gently. The Christ within you beckons you home, moment by moment, not with urgency, but with infinite tenderness, not with demand, but with quiet invitation. And as you respond to that invitation, even imperfectly, even hesitantly, you will find that life begins to take on a new quality, not because you have improved yourself, but because the self, your real self, has begun to shine through. This self is not born. It does not die. It is not threatened by the world. It is not diminished by conditions. It is not altered by appearances. It is the eternal Christ, the divine I that Jesus revealed, the I that Joel Goldsmith taught, the I that lives as your very being. As you return to this inner fountain, again and again, the outer world becomes less a battlefield and more a classroom, less a burden and more an expression, less a source of fear and more a canvas upon which the harmony of spirit paints itself anew. Carry this awareness with you lightly. Let it move with you into your conversations, into your work, into your solitude, into your challenges. You do not need to hold it tightly. You need only turn inward when the moment calls you, and when you do, you will find that the fountain is always flowing. You will find that the presence has never left you. You will find that the Christ is always here, quiet, patient, radiant, waiting only for your recognition. My friends, let us end where all true teaching begins, in silence, in oneness, in the peaceful knowing that God is the life, the mind, the substance, and the identity of every individual expression. May this awareness accompany you. May it guide you, sustain you, and reveal itself ever more fully, not as something you seek, but as what you already are. And now, let us rest in that truth. Let us abide in the presence. Let us return to the inner fountain and drink deeply of the peace that is God.